Hello, I'm Tim Wall, Senior Reporter for Pet Food Industry. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Ask the Pet Food Pro, Smart Conveyors and Packaging for Pet Food Manufacturing. Ask the Pet Food Pro allows industry professionals to pose questions directly to experts. Ask the Pet Food Pro is brought to you by Pet Food Forum and Pet Food Industry's journalists and editors. Drawing on our combined decades of experience covering the dog, cat, and other pet food sectors, you can find our reporting and analysis at petfoodindustry.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our daily newsletter and monthly magazine. Today's discussion focuses on how new technologies affect pet food handling and packaging. Dorner sponsors this edition of Ask the Pet Food Pro, and I'd like to welcome our expert guest, Marco Pardo, Senior Product Manager for Conveyance Solutions at Columbus McKinnon. Welcome, Marco, and thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Great. So before we start the discussion, I do have just a few announcements. Audience members, you have all been muted to ensure that everyone can hear and focus on the discussion. I've included many of the questions that you all sent in beforehand, but if you have a question during the discussion, please submit all those comments or questions in the chat box. And please note that this chat is also being recorded, and you'll be able to access that recording in about a week. So now, to start our discussion, let's consider how proper handling and packaging are so critical to pet food. To start this off, Marco, what are some of the most critical hygiene challenges in pet food conveyor and packaging lines, and how can some of the new technologies address them?
Yeah, that's a good question. So as pet food gets more and more human grade, obviously pathogen growth is something to be concerned about. And conveyors being a big part of the equipment handling that raw food, let's say, we could potentially have risk of cross-contamination or more growth in different areas if we don't have a hygienic piece of equipment, right? Implementing solutions like in-place washing reduces that, increases the time between washing conveyors or different equipment, but there are different solutions in the market to take care of pathogen growth or bacteria growth.
Gotcha. So you mentioned washing there a little bit. Let's delve a little bit deeper into that. How do conveyors that are designed with easy clean features improve food safety and reduce downtime during sanitation?
Yeah, so conveyors, just like any other piece of equipment, need to be washed down. It's usually done as a batch process or as the shift ends or you change different foods. We incorporate here at Dorner in our design things to make it easier and reduce that time it takes to take the conveyor apart. The conveyor usually needs to be taken apart. The belts need to be taken apart, off, maybe soaked. So we incorporate things like belt lifters, tip-up tails. Obviously, the construction of the conveyor itself is stainless steel, but really the time it takes and the tools required to do the work, we try to design things so it's as easy as possible and as fast as possible.
Gotcha. I mean, time is money.
Time is money. That's right.
So what are some of those best practices that manufacturers can use to ensure their compliance with both pet food safety and human food hygiene standards?
Yeah, the first thing I want to say is that there are different standards out there, and different equipment manufacturers either use different standards or sometimes they don't. They use the standards, but they're not certified. Dorner, our product line called Aqua Proof Ultimate, we are actually certified with a 3A certification. And we're really the only conveyor manufacturer that carries that certification. But that does a couple of things. As inspectors come around, they see the label, they see that you have the certification, it's pre-done. That helps them identify equipment or areas that could potentially have issues and eliminate those pieces of equipment without too much investigation. Obviously, we do some testing. We did testing to certify, but our design basically has a lot of different features, right? Things from polishing of the steel, inside the food zone, what kind of welds we use, whether or not we use threads. Obviously, the certified conveyors, we avoid using threads and bolts and nuts inside of where food and bacteria can grow, because every nook and cranny could harbor bacteria, right? So we do things like Surfox clean all of our welds. We avoid hardware, like I said. We obviously use belts that are certified, and we really try to make things to be taken apart easily and without tools, right? For easy cleanability. So those are just some of the things that we do in our design.
Gotcha. Keeping it easy to keep it clean.
Yeah.
And beyond that, pet food companies, of course, have to keep their products safe and clean and all that, but they also oftentimes have perhaps an intricately shaped kibble or something like that, and they have to keep that intact throughout the process. So what are some of those technologies that are best suited for handling those fragile or irregularly shaped pet food products without compromising the throughput?
Yeah, that's good. I mean, in the end, conveyor systems are all about the transferring, right? Transferring on and off machines, transferring on and off different conveyors. And as well, speeds go up, just like any other industry, you want more throughput, it becomes harder and harder to do, right? So gentle transfers and accurate transfers become critical. Little Kimball's, as an example, you're going off to a waterfall into another conveyor. Some of the things that you need to worry about is the distance or how it's actually dropping onto the conveyor, right? We use different types of belting that can support and make sure that the product stays within the conveyor, right? We use other features like if it's a flat product, as an example, we use nose bars, which are really small pulleys, right? If you want to keep the orientation of a certain product without it being moving a lot too much on the belt, accuracy, right? A lot of things are needing to be integrated with a robot. And robots, although they have very good vision systems and they can find where they need to pick, an accurate, consistent conveyor also helps in that integration.
Hmm. So you mentioned robots there, just in general with the need for speed, automation often comes into play. So what role does automation play in optimizing material flow between processing, conveying, and then packaging stages?
Yeah, automation is, well, it's really the future, right? It just depends how much automation you want to do and how quickly you want to do it. You may not be able to automate your whole factory right away. Depends how big of a company you are, what your throughput is, your demand, right? But automation obviously makes the process faster. It reduces human errors, right? It reduces waste and it really standardizes the way you manufacture, right? So that those are all good key things that automation brings. From the conveyor side, the conveyor is the artery of the factory, right? Linking different processes, different machines. And that's really the first step in automation most of the time is getting rid of or implementing a conveyor. So material handling becomes that first step in automation, right? Obviously, then you bring robots, you take people and put them into better jobs that aren't as strenuous, right, or hard to do, and make things more efficient.
Gotcha. Now, speaking of efficiency and all that, integrating all those processes is important for that. How can manufacturers achieve that seamless integration between their conveyors, weighers, fillers, and packaging equipment?
Yeah. So what we do or what we suggest is pick the right partner, right? Pick someone that's experienced, that has done this before, that has good response, and really someone that after the line is put in or the automation is put in, you have service, right? And sustainability. Some companies are big enough where they have their own PLC programmers as an example, or people that maintain or want to do the automations, but other companies don't. So it's key to pick the right partner to implement. From our experience, we interface with many, many different machines. We have done that. We have done full automation solutions. We also have worked and have an extensive distributor and integrator through a network throughout the country that we utilize and use. But yeah, selecting someone that has that experience is really key. It might get you, but especially in a planning process as well, I should say. Planning, knowing what the throughput is, what are the requirements you need. Maybe you need, as an example, an accumulation, right? System in between your machines. Most of the time people forget about that, and accumulation becomes critical. Here at Dorner or CMCO, we have two key companies that we work together as a team to bring in a one-stop shop from a conveyor size solution. So that's another important thing. So you don't want too many cooks in the kitchen, let's say.
Gotcha. Well, so you mentioned earlier some like smaller companies and even larger companies might not have the resources necessarily to completely replace everything. And a lot of companies are working with some legacy equipment, older equipment, doesn't
Yeah.
size of the company. What are some of the challenges that you face when you're trying to retrofit those legacy systems with a modern, up-to-date, top-of-the-line
Yeah.
automated system?
Yeah, I mean, in the end, it's all about the budget, right? So the only warning about just retrofitting things is that you don't want the retrofit to just be a Band-Aid, right? And if it is a Band-Aid, make sure that has a time, right, allocated to it. Because you don't want a Band-Aid to become a problem later on, and all of a sudden obsoleted parts are coming along, and then you put another Band-Aid. Next thing you know, your entire line is full of Band-Aids. So I would warn that is things that we see most often is you just do a little bit at a time just to get past that. But there are many constraints, compatibility issues from software, PLC, the electronics, even data transferring. There's many physical constraints of using an existing system and trying to retrofit, let's say, a new conveyor, right, to it. There's a lot of downtime that's also allocated to doing that, a lot of planning that goes down. You have to shut down production for an allocated amount of time. And that's if everything goes right. So there's planning, getting the equipment there, installing it, running it, testing it. There's a lot of that going on. So yeah, a lot of challenges with that, but not everyone can make a whole new line. So that's important. You
Right.
know,
The key is just pull that Band-Aid at once instead of doing a whole bunch of Band-Aids. Trying to
yeah,
get it
yeah,
all done. It's
yeah.
kind of
Or limit the amount of Band-Aids, right? I
right.
mean,
Gotcha. So the ultimate goal of all this, whether retrofitting an old line, putting in a new one, is to improve productivity. How can some of these advanced conveyor designs really improve line speed without increasing product damage or the risks of contamination?
yeah, really the line speed comes with basically every industry wants things faster, right? It's faster, cheaper, better. Those are the
Yeah.
things. So really selecting the right conveyor technology. There are a variety of different conveyors from different sanitary levels to different belt types to different speeds that it can handle. Really, that's the key. Understanding a conveyor is not always the same, right? So understanding, partnering with someone, picking the right conveyor, the right belts, the right control system, that all gets all roped into a nice bundle that you can say, oh, okay, now I feel confident that I will meet the production needs. You know,
Gotcha. All plays together.
yeah.
So when we're talking about some of those higher throughput systems, what are some strategies that manufacturers can use to balance the high throughput with some of the sustainability goals, such as reduced energy use or packaging waste?
Yeah, that's a good topic, and then it's talked about it all the time, right? From the food and pet food side of things, what we see is again that cleanability, right? It's the waste of water you use to clean, how much time, right? That's a big portion. And so as I said before, if you reduce the time it takes to clean, and you reduce the amount of water it takes to clean because everything is accessible, right? Then you're saving money, you're saving energy, you're saving water. There are other things as well. Automating a piece of equipment, you'd think you'd bring in more energy, which may be true in some cases, but a lot of the times you're also bringing efficiency, right? So the amount of energy used by each product that you make lowers, right? And that's what automation does. And then lastly, maybe a little minor, but there are more efficient motors out there that can be used, right? And we talked about the legacy products, and depending on how old a piece of equipment is, chances are that motor is not that efficient, right? There's definitely new technology out there that can be utilized. And if energy savings is important to you, you can start asking those questions, right?
Gotcha. It's really one of those things where sometimes energy efficiency and economics and sustainability can actually kind of work together. You can save money and do something that's more sustainable.
Yeah, for sure.
So speaking of taking care of things, how can predictive maintenance tools integrated into the conveyors minimize unplanned downtime and extend the equipment life?
Yeah. Yeah, this is a good topic, and it's here in some cases, right? The way I look at it, for you to have predictive maintenance, you have to start with the data, right? So you have to start with the sensors, then you have to log the data, and things like vibration or motor health or tensioning of the belt. If you can measure those things, put it together, you can pretty well predict when something is going to go down, right? Or at the very least, it will give you an indication that something is not running as it was before. So then it allows you to schedule maintenance at that time. I'm not suggesting that you should just wait to do maintenance until that happens. You should have regular maintenance, regular checkup anyways, but this will at least allow you to predict, understand if something is running a little bit different, right, than before, investigate, schedule downtime, and investigate it before it becomes a catastrophic maintenance issue, right, where you have to shut down the line for hours. So,
A stitch in time saves nine.
mm,
Well, so we were talking earlier about different sizes of companies and how these technologies can kind of scale for them. What role do modular conveyor and packaging systems play in supporting the operational scalability for growing pet food companies?
yeah, the way I look at it is different companies are different sizes. The needs immediately is different, right, for every company. I would say, again, during the planning stages, make sure you're asking the right questions about expansion, right? There are many companies we work with that they are very worried about, how do I expand this line? What if I need to bring in another case packer? Or what if the demand increases by 25% next year? What should I do? Should I allocate space here? Or at that time, should I have a different layout? What do I need to change? So thinking through those things as you plan out a project is important. Of course, expanding conveyors is also possible, right? Not literally cutting a conveyor and expanding it, attaching more conveyance to go to a different side of the plant. That's how conveyors start linking things. Maybe the end of the process is manual, right? And now you want to start automating it. That's another progression and how you can plan for the future, right? Today I might have a cart, tomorrow I might have a conveyor, right? Today I might have two packers, one filler. Tomorrow I might have double that, depending on where you want to go and what the future demand is. You start asking those questions, you start planning for it ahead of time, and things will change throughout that life cycle. But that's what I would suggest is start asking those questions and seeing how companies like Dorner, the conveyance side, and integrators can help you think through those.
Gotcha. Speaking of asking questions, if there's anybody out there in the audience who does have some questions, feel free to send those over through the chat. We'll answer them right now if you'd like. Marco, let's see, just kind of looking back at what we've already talked about here, is there any maybe up and coming technologies that you feel particularly strongly about that might be a real advancement in this, or just within the recent past, something that's really been the talk of the industry?
Yeah, I would say from the conveyor sides, belts are always being innovated by different manufacturers, bring different technologies. What we like is the thermo drive type belts, especially for like wet food, high water content, because those belts it doesn't absorb water and really limits the bacteria growth. But a lot of innovation there. There's a lot of innovation in the packaging as well, the end of the line packaging with robotics. That's been a hot topic for packaging in general. So a lot of that going on. Of course, you got to get the material to those places, right? So again, we help in doing that in an accurate way. So
Gotcha. Getting product from A to B.
A to B.
Gotcha. We've talked about robots and things like that. And one hot topic in the industry, pretty much in all industries nowadays, is artificial intelligence. Has that made any inroads into conveyors and into your realm?
You know, from a conveyor hardware perspective, no. But I definitely see that from a factory level. And we talked about predictive maintenance. I mean, to me, that is the spot where AI is going to flourish, right? Reading a bunch of data, interpreting that data to then predict what's going on. And maybe it's predicting better throughput. Where's the bottlenecks or what's going to go down? There's many different ways I think AI as a whole will help the industry. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of coming into everything. Maybe we have a question. Really mentioned the increasing popularity of human grade pet foods. Could you elaborate on this topic? Can pet food be declared human grade? Maybe a little bit. How? So let's focus this on how do human grade foods need to be? Does that influence what kind of conveyors, what kind of machinery can be used in that sense? How does, from your end, how is human grade influenced?
Yeah, I would say yes. I mean, what you want whenever it's wet food or something that can harbor bacteria, right? The human grade food, what you're worried about is cross contamination and even getting a recall if it gets out in the field, right? You want to avoid that. The way you avoid that is by making sure you have a sustainable, washable type of equipment, right? And again, you can spend a lot of time washing every nook and cranny and hope that you don't have any bacteria and everything else. Or you can have a piece of equipment that, as our conveyors, minimizes horizontal surfaces, as an example, right? Why do we do that? It's because we want the water to drain off, right? And the equipment to be dry. Another thing is what we talked about, the belts being easily taken out. Why is that? It's because we want to reduce time, right? You want sometimes to take that belt, go soak it in a chemical and clean it while you're taking a high pressure wash and cleaning the conveyor, right? We do other things like we apply a minimum radius for every corner, right? I think it's a half inch or a quarter of an inch. Again, why do we do that? Well, we want to avoid those sharp corners where bacteria grow. So that's the difference. Of course, we don't do this in every conveyor. We have different levels of sanitary requirements and different conveyors that goes along with that. So another thought is thinking, well, where do I need the most sanitation, right, in the process? Obviously, in the raw food side would be one, but once it's packaged, what's the environment? That's the question, right? Because once it's packaged, there's little risk of contamination. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you should go to a, let's say, steel conveyor, right? You may still need a stainless steel conveyor just because of the wet environment in a factory. Maybe you don't have a wall dividing the package side with the raw food side. So yeah, those are some of the things that we see from us applying these conveyors to poultry and raw meats and cheeses to then going into pet foods more and more often.
So can those same lines be used? Like if a line is used for a pet food, a human grade pet food, can it then also be used for a human grade, like a human food? Or do those have to be kept separate?
Well, I don't think I ever ran into that, but I guess in theory, from the equipment side, sure, why not? At least from the conveyor side.
Equipment would physically work for it, whether it's
Yeah,
legal
yeah,
or not.
right, right.
Yeah,
The certification we carry in our conveyors, being 3A, is meant for cheeses and meat, raw meats, poultries, right? That type of material. So,
gotcha. So to answer Annette's question, I'd say the same equipment can be used, but I don't know this myself. I'd say check with a lawyer whether you could use the exact same ones. But it's certainly something that's become a very strong trend in pet food. So you also mentioned earlier, like the ability of some of the conveyors to better handle wet foods or higher moisture products. And there's been a real trend towards high protein pet foods and treats and things like that. How has that movement towards higher moisture influenced your market? Has there been a greater demand for some of those moisture resistant products? And
yeah, I mean, I would say that we deal with protein on the food side just as much as on the pet side. From the equipment standpoint, we don't change much because we can deal with it, but we have seen greater demand for that. I mean, of course, you know, food is an interesting industry because people and population always grow, right? So you need to make food faster and you need to make more of it. So it's not like it's a dying industry by any means. You just have to get more and more efficient.
gotcha. So let's see, to elaborate on maybe some of the efficiency ideas there. We're talking about some of the easy clean features on belts and stuff like that. Are there some features on that you might like to tell us a little bit about? Like if you were going to pick a top feature for making a belt easy clean, which would be the top one you would suggest?
I would say belt lifters and what we call our tip up tails, right? So a conveyor usually has a motor end and what we call the idler end. So what we do is not the motor end, but the idler end, we tip up, allowing slack on the belt. Okay. Combined with belt lifters, which is along the conveyor, this means that the belt is now elevated above the frame of the conveyor, allowing you to look into the conveyor and therefore spray the conveyor. You don't necessarily need to take the belt off to clean the conveyor. In that case, you have access to the interior of the conveyor. You can also take some parts and pieces from our conveyors easily without tools, basically. Everything just fits together in a clever way that allows you to take it apart, put it back together without instructions, without tools, right? I would say those two features are one of the best two features that you want. There are other features as well. We make this coupling, motor coupling, that can easily be put on and off again without too many tools. And that again is for the efficiency. So motors usually don't wash motors necessarily, right? You take the motors off, you may wipe them down or something, put it aside, and then you move the conveyor to the either washing facility or somewhere else. Or it could be washed right in the line. But that's another one. So removing and decoupling motor from the conveyor is another good feature. Now, the belts themselves, like I said, there's a lot of innovation in belts, and there's a lot of big companies that specialize in belts. I'm sure most viewers here know it. If you know anything about conveyors, right? That's usually what people think about. There's lots of belts that carry certifications. I would say be on the lookout for belts that can make a turn and be also certified, right? Because that is difficult to do. If you have nooks and crannies in the belt that allows you to make a turn, be modular, right? That also means that there's nooks and crannies there food can get in, right? So just that's a key thing to think about.
Mhm. It's always a danger of any kind of curve or turn. It sounds watch out.
Yeah, and you can use different methods. You don't necessarily need to use a curve. You can avoid them as much as possible as well, right?
Mhm.
So,
Clever design.
yeah,
So you mentioned like the belt lifters. Is that something that could be retrofit onto an old system? Like if a factory was trying to update?
I think I think it's possible with the right partnership. I can certainly speak from our equipment. If you ended up acquiring our equipment and it happened to be a couple years old and you didn't get that option at that time, it is likely that we can retrofit that in with the existing equipment. It might take some clever manufacturing and clever design, but it's not impossible.
Mhm. Speaking of some of those not impossible stories, is there maybe a particular anecdote you could share of some time when you've seen a real change or a real improvement in a production line from adding some of these retrofitting, or when a company's really completely renovated their factory?
Yeah, I can't say like a complete renovation, but there's a good story where we built a modular system. We talked about modularity and then flexibility, right? There's a good story where we ended up making a handling system using conveyors, and we ended up putting everything on casters so it can easily be moved. But we also standardized the conveyors. So then, as an example, you can have four conveyors making a line, right? And then tomorrow the recipe changes. All of a sudden we have three conveyors making that same line, right? And that one conveyor goes somewhere else. And there are multiple lines within this facility, but we gave them standard offerings, let's say standard products, to then allow them to reconfigure their assembly line to make the products that they want that day, that week, that month. I thought that was a good story. They really liked in the end what that entailed, right? But yeah, that brought some efficiencies to their facility.
More flexibility, allow them to
Mhm.
adapt with the market, fast changing market.
Yeah. I will say it's obviously a smaller type company where they didn't have big equipment or a big case packer that they needed to move around or anything like that. So it's a good first step in automation.
Gotcha. Okay. So we've covered all the questions that we had, and it looks like we've covered everything that the audience had as well. Was there anything else that you'd like to add in, Marco?
I guess I would just like to strengthen the comments about planning, right? And project planning. A lot of times, what we see is that the conveyors are forgotten, to tell you the truth, especially large projects, right? Because people are worried about long lead time items, case packers, fillers, ovens, whatever they may be. Let's get that machine, let's spec that out, let's make sure that the lead time of that machine is within what we want. And you get rolling and planning and you forget that conveyors still need to link those machines and processes. And there's still a lead time, although the owner's lead time is extremely short in conveyors, which helps, right? But it's also the budget, the planning around the conveyance. Don't forget that handling material also takes specialized equipment if you want to do it in the right sanitation level with the right orientation or gentle, as you brought up, right? Handling. Don't get yourself into compromising the conveyor because you didn't plan ahead for it. There's plenty of people, ourselves, integrators, everyone in the industry that can help. The other thing is accumulation. Everyone forgets about accumulation, but when you're planning a line, machines have different speeds, right? And sometimes you need to accumulate product between these machines because they're either different speeds or you have a stoppage of one machine. Maybe you're refilling cartons into a case packer, right? You don't want to stop in the filler from filling if you have a stoppage. So that means you need an accumulation system between. So very important to also bring the efficiency of the plant up with accumulation. And our sister company, Darby, makes great accumulation. We work together. We're all under the same global CMCO company, and our engineers work together on a daily basis to make full system a reality.
Gotcha. Always keep the conveyors in mind.
Mm,
Don't forget how to get from A to B.
yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Marco Pardo, Senior Product Manager for Conveyance Solutions at Columbus McKinnon. And thank you to our audience out there. And I'd like to give a great big thank you to Dorner for sponsoring this edition of Ask the Pet Food Pro. And also a big thanks to the Watt Global Media team who made all this possible. And thank you to our international audience for joining us. Watch for more Ask the Pet Food Pro chats brought to you by Pet Food Industry and Pet Food Forum. I'm Tim Wall, Senior Reporter for Pet Food Industry. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day or evening. And until the next time on Ask the Pet Food Pro, goodbye.
Thanks, Tim.
Yep. Thank you, Marco.